Welcome to a deep dive into, well, this is going to be interesting, the world of Arthur Schopenhauer,
Oh, yeah.
a philosopher who, well, he really didn't believe in sugarcoating anything, did he? We're going to explore his most influential work, The World as Will and Representation, and let me tell you, it is a wild ride.
It certainly is.
Get ready to explore, like really explore the nature of reality, the power behind those desires you think you're choosing,
Right.
and how art, maybe just maybe, can be our own little life raft in a sea of, well, you'll hear.
You'll hear. Yeah, Schopenhauer, he gets pegged as a bit of a downer.
Right.
And, okay, maybe that's not entirely unfair, but
Yeah.
amidst all the, let's call it philosophical realism,
Yeah.
he asks some really, really thought-provoking questions about, about existence, about why we're here that still resonate today.
They do.
Big questions about, like I said, why we want what we want, why getting it doesn't seem to fix anything,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
You know, I have to admit, even just reading about Schopenhauer's life, it was an experience. This wasn't some, quiet scholar tucked away in an ivory tower. Schopenhauer was dealing with some serious family drama. I mean, we're talking strained relationships, potential suicides, like the whole shebang.
Yeah.
The man even ended up in court after, well, there was an argument with a woman and, it involved her taking a tumble down some stairs. Not exactly Mr. Congeniality, this guy.
It's true. His personal life often resembled something out of a soap opera. Lots of drama.
Yeah.
Schopenhauer was known for his, well, stubborn personality and this almost obsessive dedication to his philosophical ideas.
Oh, yeah.
He was so sure of himself, in fact, that he actually tried to outshine Hegel
Oh, wow.
by scheduling his lectures at the same time.
Oh, no.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
It didn't quite work out that way.
Oh, poor Arthur. But hey, at least his ideas were a hit, right? Speaking of which, let's dive into the heart of his philosophy, specifically this whole world as will and representation business. I have to admit, it sounds a little intimidating. Can we break it down a little?
Absolutely.
Right.
Imagine the world we experience, just through our senses, the things that we see, hear, touch.
Right.
That's what Schopenhauer calls the world as representation. It's how our mind interprets reality, basically.
Okay.
Makes sense so far.
It does. Yeah.
But here's where things get a little more interesting, a little more Schopenhauer-y, if you will.
Okay.
He argues that there's a deeper level to reality, a kind of hidden force that's driving everything that we perceive, even our perception itself.
Okay.
And he calls this force the will.
Okay, so not the kind of will where I decide to have another cup of coffee,
Right.
but something way bigger, way more fundamental. Am I getting that right?
You got it. Think of it like this. You know how you chase after that promotion?
Yeah.
You finally get it?
Right.
Then you're already looking at the next rung on the ladder?
Yeah.
That's Schopenhauer's will in action. Always seeking, never satisfied. And it's not just us.
Okay.
It's everything. Gravity, pulling objects together,
All right.
a flower pushing his roots into the soil. Schopenhauer would argue that it's all the will, just restlessly expressing itself at different levels.
So my deep desire for another cup of coffee,
Right.
that's just a tiny expression of this, like, cosmic will.
Well, when you put it that way.
Suddenly that second latte feels very, very existential, though. Maybe not in the way I'd like it to be.
That's the beauty of Schopenhauer.
Yay.
He forces you to see the profound in the everyday. But before you start justifying every craving with, like, existentialism,
Right.
let's add another layer to this.
Mm-hmm.
Remember the theory of Platonic forms?
Vaguely. Yeah, vaguely. It's like there's this perfect blueprint out there for everything.
Yeah.
Every chair is just a pale imitation of the ultimate ideal chair that exists on some other plane.
Exactly. Schopenhauer, he puts his own spin on it, though.
Right.
He believed that these forms weren't just, abstract concepts floating around.
Right.
But they actually represented the fundamental ways that this universal will makes itself known in our world, in the world of representation.
Okay.
Picture it as a kind of like a hierarchy.
Oh.
You've got basic forces like gravity at the bottom.
Right.
And then more complex manifestations like us, like humans, higher up.
Okay. So where do we fit into all this will-driven striving if we're higher than, a rock or gravity or whatever? What makes humans different?
That's a great question. And Schopenhauer argued that What sets us apart is our capacity for self-awareness.
Okay.
We're not just driven by the will.
Yeah.
We can actually contemplate it, try to understand its workings, even though we can't escape its influence.
Right.
And that brings us to what is perhaps the most interesting part of Schopenhauer's philosophy. The idea that we might, just might, find a sliver of liberation through art.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting because honestly, all this talk about this like unstoppable will had me feeling a little, well, a little trapped. Please tell me there's some hope, some way to catch our breath.
There might be, but it's not necessarily the sunny escape we usually crave.
Okay.
Schopenhauer, he believed that true engagement with art, like a complete and total immersion in its beauty,
Yeah.
that could offer us a momentary reprieve from the will's
Oh.
relentless demands. Imagine getting so completely lost in a piece of music, a painting, a performance, that you momentarily forget all those,
Right.
everyday worries, all those nagging desires.
Hmm.
They just fade away.
Okay, so we're not talking about like bopping along to a catchy tune on the radio.
No.
It's about having a genuine experience, something almost, I don't know, spiritual,
Yeah.
where we connect with something beyond ourselves.
Exactly. Schopenhauer would call it becoming a pure, will-less subject of knowledge.
Whoa.
He saw a strong parallel between this state and what's achieved through meditation in Eastern traditions.
Okay.
It's about silencing the mind, letting go of those constant cravings and attachments.
Right, right. So, okay, if the will is like this eternal, ever-present force, what did Schopenhauer think happens when we die?
Mm.
Do we just sort of dissolve back into it like a drop of water falling back into the ocean?
That's a question that Schopenhauer, he grappled with that throughout his life.
Mm-hmm.
And his views, they actually evolved over time.
Mm-hmm.
Early on, he seemed to lean towards the idea that, yeah, individual consciousness, it just ceases to exist at death.
Okay.
It kind of merges back into that universal will we've been talking about. But later on, he started exploring some more nuanced perspectives, drawing inspiration from Eastern concepts like, karma, rebirth.
So he started to at least consider the possibility that we might, I don't know, in some form come back again. That's a bit of a plot twist.
It is, but it's important to understand what he didn't mean.
Okay, okay.
Schopenhauer was very clear that he was not talking about, reincarnation in the traditional sense.
Right.
With a distinct soul being reborn into a new body.
Mm.
He even criticized, like, the Indian concept of transmigration as being, a little too simplistic.
Wow.
Instead, he was really interested in this possibility that death might not be, a complete and final end,
Right.
but rather a transition to a different mode of existence.
Yeah.
Something that he cautiously referred to as immortality.
Okay, now I'm really curious. That word immortality, it usually comes with a lot of baggage. Heaven, harps, the whole deal. What did Schopenhauer think it actually entailed?
Well, he was always careful, Schopenhauer, to avoid any, concrete descriptions of an afterlife.
Right.
He preferred to stick with what he believed could be, deduced through reason and observation.
Sure.
But he hinted at a state where individual consciousness, as we experience it in life, might dissolve and then kind of merge with this universal will.
Okay.
In this state, the boundaries between self and other, they would just disappear.
Right.
And we'd become part of something,
Yeah.
larger, more enduring.
So kind of like losing your individual sense of self and becoming one with the universe. That sounds intense.
It does, doesn't it? But it's not about, achieving some blissful state of unity or anything like that.
Okay.
For Schopenhauer, even in this hypothetical state of immortality, the will's,
Right.
restless striving, it would continue.
Right.
Remember, he saw the will as this fundamental force of nature
Right. Right.
operating at like a cosmic level.
Yeah.
And even death wouldn't extinguish its influence.
Wow. Okay, so no escaping the will, even in the afterlife. I have to admire his commitment to facing those, well, potentially uncomfortable truths. Speaking of which, we've talked a lot about, the will and its influence and all that. But we haven't really touched on how Schopenhauer thought we should live our lives because of it. Any advice from our resident pessimist?
For someone often labeled a pessimist, Schopenhauer did offer paths, albeit somewhat challenging ones, to navigate a world governed by this relentless will. He proposed a few ways to manage the will's influence, to maybe find moments of respite from its constant demands.
Okay, I'm listening. How do we break free, even if it's just for a little while?
Well, Schopenhauer believed that true engagement with art, that complete immersion that we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
you know, that could offer a taste of this freedom.
Okay.
By losing ourselves in beauty, we can momentarily silence the will's, incessant chatter
Right.
and achieve this state of pure selfless contemplation.
Right. Like those moments where you're just so captivated by a piece of music or a work of art that everything else just fades away.
Exactly.
But did he offer any other, I don't know, suggestions for those of us who aren't like art aficionados?
He did, and this one might seem a bit surprising at first.
Okay.
Schopenhauer was deeply, deeply influenced by Eastern traditions,
Right.
particularly Buddhism, with its emphasis on detaching from worldly desires.
Okay.
He saw asceticism, the practice of self-denial and renunciation, as another powerful way to kind of loosen the will's grip.
So like giving up our desires, our cravings, all those things that the will seems to be like pushing us towards, that sounds pretty intense.
Yeah.
Like really intense. Did Schopenhauer really believe that everyone should like live like a monk?
Yeah.
Surviving on rice cakes and meditation?
It's important to remember that Schopenhauer was a philosopher,
Right.
not a lifestyle guru.
Okay, okay.
He wasn't prescribing a rigid set of rules for,
Right, right.
everyone to follow.
Gotcha.
Instead, he was exploring different ways of understanding and relating to our own desires.
So it's less about never having that extra slice of pizza
Right.
and more about recognizing that the pizza isn't going to like magically solve all of our problems.
Exactly.
That maybe true contentment comes from something deeper than, satisfying every passing whim.
That's a great way to put it. Schopenhauer wasn't advocating for everyone to, renounce all worldly possessions and go live in a cave.
Right.
But he was encouraging us to examine our relationship with desire,
Okay.
to ask ourselves what we're really seeking when we chase after something.
That's a pretty relevant message, especially in, today's world where we're just bombarded with all these messages telling us to, buy more, do more, be more.
Right.
It's so easy to get caught up in that cycle of wanting without ever stopping to to question what we're really trying to achieve.
It is. And I think that's why Schopenhauer's ideas continue to resonate with people, even today.
Yeah.
He's not offering any easy answers, quick fixes, but he is forcing us to confront some uncomfortable truths
Right.
about the nature of desire, about the limits of human happiness,
Right.
and about the possibility of finding meaning in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable.
It's like he's saying, look, this thing, this will, it's a powerful force.
Yes.
And it's not going anywhere.
Right.
But by understanding how it operates, we can maybe make choices that lead to a little less suffering, a little more peace.
That's a great way to sum it up.
Yeah.
And, even if you don't, buy into his entire philosophical system, there's a lot of wisdom to be found in his ideas.
Yeah.
About the nature of desire, the pursuit of happiness, and the importance of, cultivating a certain level of detachment from the things that we think we want.
It's fascinating how much his thinking seems to connect with, certain modern psychological approaches like mindfulness.
Oh, yeah.
Which emphasizes learning to observe your thoughts and emotions, without getting completely swept away by them.
Absolutely. Schopenhauer's definitely ahead of his time in recognizing the importance of mental discipline and self-awareness. And even though he, didn't have all the answers, his willingness to grapple with these big questions, to challenge, conventional thinking is something I think we can all learn from.
It makes you wonder how different our world might be if we all spent, I don't know, even just a little more time contemplating these ideas. If we all took a moment to just ask ourselves, why am I doing this? What am I hoping to achieve?
Those are questions we could all benefit from asking ourselves a little more often.
It's amazing how much of modern psychology just seems to echo some of these ideas that Schopenhauer was talking about.
Right.
This whole idea of accepting that we can't control everything.
Yeah.
That sometimes the best way to deal with difficult emotions is to just, I don't know, kind of observe them without judgment.
Right.
It all feels very Schopenhauer-esque, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
Schopenhauer was, I think, really onto something with this emphasis on self-awareness and mental discipline.
Yeah.
He understood that true peace, it doesn't come from getting everything we want, but from learning to manage our desires.
Right.
To find contentment within ourselves, even amidst, the chaos of life.
It makes you wonder, would he have been into, like, mindfulness apps if he was around today?
Right.
It's kind of funny to imagine him fitting in a quick meditation between, writing scathing philosophical critiques.
I'd love to see that.
Uh-huh.
But speaking of scathing critiques, I think it's time we address the elephant in the room, or rather, the philosopher in the room, Friedrich Nietzsche.
Right, of course.
As we've been discussing, Nietzsche was, he was profoundly influenced by Schopenhauer.
Oh, yeah.
Especially early on in his career.
Huh.
But ultimately took his ideas in a completely different direction.
He did.
It's like they were looking at the same world, but through, like, completely different lenses.
It really is. It's like they both kind of looked into the abyss of Schopenhauer's will and just had totally opposite reactions.
Right.
Where Schopenhauer saw this force that had to be managed, even subdued, Nietzsche saw.
Oh,
Well, what did Nietzsche see?
Nietzsche saw the will, not as some source of suffering to be escaped, but as the very foundation of creativity, of personal power, even of joy.
Wow.
He embraced the will's energy as something to be, like, harnessed, channeled,
Right.
and directed towards self-creation and personal growth.
Okay, so a total 180 from Schopenhauer. How did that difference play out in their philosophies?
Well, I think it's most evident in their views on suffering.
Okay.
Schopenhauer, he saw suffering as just this inherent part of existence,
Right.
something to be minimized or even, like, transcended if at a possible. But Nietzsche,
Yeah.
he believed that suffering was actually essential for growth. He argued that by confronting and overcoming challenges, we could forge ourselves into, stronger, more resilient individuals.
So it's like Schopenhauer is saying, like, avoid the fire, while Nietzsche is saying, like, step into the fire. That's how you become, forged anew.
That's a great way to put it. And this difference, it extends to their views on art too.
Okay.
Remember how Schopenhauer, he believed that art could offer this temporary escape from the will.
Right.
A glimpse into this realm of pure will-less contemplation.
Yeah.
Nietzsche saw it very, very differently. He believed that art was about affirming life in all its, messy, tragic, exhilarating beauty.
Okay.
For him, great art, it wasn't about escaping the world, but about plunging headfirst into the heart of it.
So Schopenhauer is, like, finding peace in these quiet moments of contemplation, while Nietzsche's finding it in, like, the storm of creation and self-expression. It's amazing how two people can start with, like, the same basic idea and reach such dramatically different conclusions.
It just goes to show the power and the complexity of, philosophical inquiry.
It really does.
But perhaps the biggest difference between Schopenhauer and Nietzsche, it lies in their views on morality.
Okay.
Schopenhauer, driven by his compassion and desire to alleviate suffering, he advocated for a kind of ethical quietism.
Okay.
He believed we should strive to minimize harm, to act with compassion.
Right.
But ultimately to reduce our desires and attachments to the world. Nietzsche, on the other hand,
Yeah.
he rejected traditional notions of good and evil.
Wow.
He believed that morality was often used as a tool by the weak to restrain the strong.
So Schopenhauer is, like, urging us to live ethically, compassionately,
Right.
while Nietzsche's telling us to, like, I don't know, throw out the rule book and write our own.
In a way, yeah. Nietzsche, he championed this master morality
Yeah.
that emphasized, self-creation, the pursuit of excellence,
Right.
and the courage to live life on your own terms,
Yeah.
even if it meant challenging conventional norms.
Wow. Okay, so we've got Schopenhauer, who, while maybe a bit gloomy, at least offers this kind of roadmap
Right.
to navigate life's challenges with a little more grace,
Yeah.
a little less suffering.
Right.
And then there's Nietzsche, who just throws out the map entirely and says, go forth and create your own path.
Exactly. And the funny thing is they both drew inspiration from the same source. Schopenhauer's concept of the will,
Right.
it just goes to show that even, the most radical ideas can have multiple interpretations,
Right.
leading to, like, wildly divergent paths.
That's what I love about philosophy. It's not about, finding the right answer,
Right.
but about wrestling with these big questions,
Yeah.
exploring different perspectives, and ultimately forming, like, our own understanding of the world.
Exactly. And I think Schopenhauer, despite his reputation as a pessimist, would have appreciated that. After all, he believed that true knowledge, it came from, from questioning our assumptions,
Yeah.
confronting uncomfortable truths.
Right.
And never shying away from the complexity of existence.
Well said. Well said. So for our listeners who are now, thoroughly engrossed in the world of 19th century German philosophy, where do we go from here? What's the next step on this journey of existential exploration?
Well, I think the best way to engage with philosophy is to, engage with it.
Right.
Don't just take,
Yeah.
our word for it. Pick up Schopenhauer's world as will and representation.
Yeah.
See what resonates with you.
Yeah.
What challenges your thinking.
Right. And then when you're ready for like a completely different take on a lot of the same themes, dive into Nietzsche.
Yes.
Start with Beyond Good and Evil or Thus Spoke Zarathustra.
Great books.
They're both great entry points into his world.
And most importantly, don't be afraid to draw your own conclusions. Philosophy, it's not a spectator sport. It's about asking questions,
Yeah.
challenging your assumptions,
Yeah.
and actively shaping your own understanding of the world and your place in it.
That's a great place to end this deep dive. We hope you've enjoyed this whirlwind tour through the philosophical landscape of Arthur Schopenhauer and his, sometimes gloomy, often brilliant, always thought-provoking ideas.
Until next time,
Yeah.
keep asking those big questions. And remember,
Yeah.
as Schopenhauer himself said, life is a constant process of dying. But hey, it's also a pretty amazing ride.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for listening, everyone.